Hey guys, hope you're doing well. So obviously the stream has just started, and I'd like to give a great shout out to Hojack Borsman. Um, Honestly, I've seen you in the comments for a long time, so really appreciated that you've actually joined. And welcome to Captain. So nice to actually see someone leading us and our kind of performances on the field in FPL in that kind of sense. So once again, welcome to the club. Um, let's just actually look at the YouTube comments. So Yahya Hassan says, what do you think about captaining Jota over Salah? I think it's a fantastic choice, to be honest. Let's actually look at what I've gone for so far. As far as I recall, I've just put it on Trent for now. And the reason why is because I just think Everton have been extremely poor. We'll talk about James and his kind of injury situation or whatever has been discussed by Tuchel in a bit. But I have put it on Alexander-Arnold. I think Jota is a great pick as well. We've seen Everton concede a lot from central threats, mostly due to Josh King. We saw, for example, some teams especially not playing specific kind of centre forward threats. So, for example, I think Cole Palmer played last week, or 2 weeks ago as part of City. And of course, there wasn't a great look there because I don't think we expected much from Palmer. We saw Bernardo Silva scoring goals. We've also seen Everton concede through right-sided set pieces. They've been generally quite disorganized. So that for me has been quite a problem. In terms of other things such as the Jota captaincy, yeah, I think it's a bit of a toss-up because I feel every time I watch Jota and Salah play, I wouldn't necessarily say Jota gets more chances. I think they're rather similar. Maybe Salah gets a little bit less in terms of XG, but he does provide more in terms of assists. And that's kind of where I think things change between the two of them. I still think the Jota captaincy is fantastic. Ultimately, a lot of us have all three players, so I don't think it's a huge differential, if that makes sense. So Omar says, I'm not sure this is the week to go against Salah. Last week was there and will come another week. Not sure it's this one. I mean, the last few weeks, to be honest, have been good enough weeks to go against Salah. The question is, of course, who did you go as a kind of differential, right? So we've seen Cancelo captaincy, I think 2 weeks back, do good. Last week, the captaincy wasn't great because I think no one has really been tempted to actually put the armband on another Liverpool player. Whereas the last 2 to 3 weeks, we've actually seen, I think, Jota and Trent haul a little bit harder than Salah. So I can understand why people are moving away from him. I'm tempted, and that's largely due to the fact that I think the clean sheet is almost a given. This week is the same as last week to go against Salah because Jota has the same fixtures as Salah. I mean, yeah, you're kind of right, Kevin. I guess ultimately it depends on the opponent as well, like whether we feel that Jota will provide a bit more versus a specific opponent, things like that. So Art Edit has asked me to rate his team. He's got Guaita, Trent, Cancelo, Cody, Christensen, Salah, Rafinha, Jota, Gallagher, Kane, Antonio. Benched. I think, yeah, the bench makes sense to me. I had a similar kind of headache where I ultimately put Tony on my bench. As you can see, I still actually have James, and I'll discuss James in a brief moment. But I actually think you're good to hold this week. I think Rafinha has, in a sense, medium-term dividends. He should be someone that you can look to keep in your team in the meantime. As far as the other kind of pieces in the team, I wouldn't move Cody out this week. Christensen might be someone you'd like to move out. If you roll as well, what's nice is you can probably get out of Christensen, maybe make an upgrade from Christensen, and then think about, let's say, changing 1 or 2 players in your team that are problematic. I will be checking Twitter in a quick second. I am putting the captaincy and the armband on Trent for now, but we'll see what happens. Mio says, choose one, sell Rudiger for Cancelo, rotation risk, sell Foden for Gundogan / Bernardo, roll transfer. It's a tough one. I think Foden's not going to feature, so I would be quite happy. I think there are short-term dividends to be made in terms of going for the Gundogan transfer. I'm not a huge fan of dropping Rudiger. I think Rudiger is less of a... I actually think Rudiger is not really a rotation risk. Thank you, David Luiz. Really appreciate that, to be honest. Hey, Harold. Hey, Konate. How are you doing? Is Foden still a good option? I think Foden's a fantastic option. So I did just mention that, going for Gundogan, it might be a nice short-term punt. A lot of people have been saying as well that when KDB is back, that Gundogan won't be as efficacious as a player. And I do agree with those sentiments. I think that's the kind of reason why there are benefits to holding Foden. Last week, I think there was a clear opportunity to go from Foden to Jota. If you didn't make that transfer, that's completely fine. But I feel like if you didn't make that transfer last week, you kind of stick with Foden, or you side grade into the Man City midfielder because of the injury situation. Dinesh says, just did Foden to Rafinha. What do you think about it? So I think Rafinha, the tricky thing is that he does have some tough fixtures, right? So if we actually look at Rafinha, I am looking to move out of him short term, but I do understand when you're looking at the fixtures, maybe you think short term Crystal Palace and Brentford are nice games. My issue is that I'm obviously not going to keep him for this kind of run between Chelsea to Aston Villa, because Aston Villa right now are looking quite good. And yeah, overall this run is quite poor. I mean, even if you put the Burnley game in there, I still wouldn't really probably want to own him until we're talking, let's say, the Newcastle game onwards. So that's the kind of worry for me with Rafinha. I'm not a huge fan of the transfer, but I guess if you didn't have any problems in your team, that probably makes sense. Is Foden... sorry, I've already answered that question. Whom to bench, White or Toney? I would definitely bench White this week. I expect United will score versus Arsenal, even though actually Arsenal have been United's bogey team for the last few years, especially under Arteta. Hey, Jankster, how are you doing? Too cool to live. Keep Vardy, take a hit for Kane, or downgrade to Jesus. Rogers mentioned Vardy might get rested in midweek. I completely understand, but I think the thing about if you're a Vardy owner is that right now a lot of the forwards aren't guaranteed anything. I don't really want to take a hit for Kane. I know Kane's been rested and all that, and he has 2 good games after that. I just think that Vardy has a nice game. I think he plays Southampton. Sorry, not Southampton, but he plays quite a nice opponent after the game versus Southampton. So let's have a look at Vardy. Can't remember what it is right now. Yeah, I still think Aston Villa is a nice game, and you want to keep him versus for that Newcastle game. I guess the issue is, like, if you go for Kane, are you going to keep Kane for a long term? Are you keeping him up until, let's say, are you keeping him for this fixture run, or are you switching to Ronaldo? Because my one issue with people who are moving away from Vardy is, if Ronaldo seems like the better option, doesn't it make sense to probably save your money and book that transfer in a little bit later and just go for Ronaldo at that kind of Norwich game as a good starting point? Because we don't get to see Rangnick until Crystal Palace, and we still know that they're managed under Carrick in the Arsenal game, which I don't think will actually be a fantastic game for United. It's nice to obviously be at home, and I just think that the Ronaldo run is a bit better, so going for Kane just feels like a short-term punt. Hojak says, just because it's a derby, I'm unsure about captaining any Liverpool players. I initially captained James, but it seems like he'll be benched most probably. Now I'm stuck between Jota and Salah on his priority. Yeah, look, I mean, I think, yes, on one hand, Everton have done quite well in derbies in recent memory. I think the last few results, if we actually look at head-to-heads, have been draws, basically, where Everton have actually done quite well. Or the game, whenever it's played, away from Anfield, has been extremely low scoring. So if we actually look at the head-to-head, which is something I was actually looking at yesterday, just because I'm somewhat interested in these kind of stats. So we look at the Everton games, when Everton played at home, it was 0-0, 0-0, 0-0, and then 2-2. So incredibly low-scoring games. And off of this very, very poor conjecturing over the last three to 4 years worth of results, I've basically deduced that Trent is quite a sensible captaincy, because I think the odds of a clean sheet are high. But I think when it also comes down to it, I think this Liverpool team is in fantastic form. This Everton team have nothing to provide from an attacking edge, which is why I'm leaning more towards the Trent captaincy this week. I also just generally look across to my team and I say, Kane's basically not shown me anything or any reason to really captain him. He just doesn't seem like a viable option. I don't think his ownership's actually that high in the top 10k. I think people are less tempted to captain him at this point in time, maybe just due to the fact that he's maybe disappointed in recent memory, but we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I just think that, especially since his Everton side don't have anything to provide. Remember as well that the Everton team that scored 2 goals was a very informed team where James was doing well, Calvert-Lewin was doing well at the time, and those players have either left the team or have been injured for a long time. The Gray injury and him lacking fitness is going to be a problematic thing. I know Doucouré is back, and he has been back for a game now, but just not that high on Everton and what they can produce from an attacking point of view. And also, this Liverpool team, I have to mention, has actually outproduced in terms of creative chances versus City in the last few weeks, and that's for me a good enough justification to say that they probably will do well in the near future, especially in this Everton game. Imran says, hi Fran, what do you think about taking a hit to take out Foden? If so, who comes in? already have Jota and Gallagher. And that's the thing. So I think either you take a hit to go for a City midfielder because you think Foden won't get points, which means probably just going for someone like Gundogan, or I think you actually roll the transfer, in a sense, with Foden, and you leave that be. I know Vardy's going to be rested, so I think that's the issue with Vardy. But ultimately, we've seen a lot of forwards blank, so that's my worry. If you're taking a hit to get out of Vardy, if you're going out of Vardy and you're not taking a hit, then that's a bit more justified. Lucas Moura is actually quite an interesting option in this 3-4-3. I think he got an assist in the previous game versus Leeds, which is of course not, I think, something that is a good enough kind of benchmark. I think production-wise, we've definitely seen less from him in recent years. He's actually at a good price, but I still need to see more from him before I would say he is a solid option, because I just think that there are other players who are a little bit more talismanic at that kind of 6.0 price range, who, yes, they play for mid-table clubs, but we've seen that they've been able to produce quite a bit. Hi, Anka. Bench is a full hospital award again, time to hit. Keep faith in Rafinha or swap to Jota now, means Livramento starts, or MacArthur to Cornet. Thanks for your patience. So what I would actually say is that I think I would like to go Rafinha to Jota, but I completely understand that Livramento starting isn't the best of situations. Maybe MacArthur to Cornet is actually quite interesting, although I'm a bit worried about how that locks you away from Jota. I wonder how that kind of changes things for you, because I would prefer to have Jota in my team for the next few weeks. I know some people, such as Konate, are not really a huge fan of going for a triple up of a specific team, but I can't deny the fact that Liverpool look extremely exciting to own. And if we just quickly look at, let's say, the kind of official statistics this season, as I said, this Liverpool's team have just been producing on a massive level. Look at their XG; it's 6+ higher than City. I mean, that's monstrous, considering when we're all thinking about, let's say, captaining some Tottenham players who have produced basically 13 this season, and we don't imagine Conte will provide, an absolute overhaul over the next few weeks until maybe he finds a more defined structure or changes formation, or finds a way to implement, let's say, a little bit more creativity in this midfield while trying to restrain that team from conceding as much as they have recently versus some very, very poor teams. So there's a lot to do on Conte's plate. So for me, I think sticking with Liverpool players, sticking with Liverpool captaincies makes a lot of sense. The alternative, obviously, is just going to be Chelsea and City players. If you're going for more differentials than that, then I mean, that is extremely brave, of course. And for example, someone, let's say, who captained Vardy last week would have been immensely rewarded, but whether you actually benefit from that on a weekly basis is another question, because we've seen so many blanks from captains potentially like Vardy, whereas Salah, even in a poor week, was almost due an assist. Finn Johnson says Gallagher versus Leeds will play Tony and roll transfer. I like Gallagher versus Leeds. I think it's a nicer matchup. I think Tony, getting to play versus a rested Tottenham, I don't think it's an actual joke. Everyone knows midweek games are going to be tough. Will James start? Mystic Monkey. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that. I would say that it's probably likely that James doesn't start. I still have him started just because I think I know people have been talking about, let's say, James making a cameo and that kind of ruining teams in the sense that he plays one like maybe, let's say, 10-15 minutes, but I'm tempted to say that he probably doesn't make a cameo. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I would like to start him, because for me, he either starts or doesn't play. Because for me, I think Watford will probably be conceding to Chelsea, and I can't really see why you need to sub in James to consolidate a victory. Captain Jota, Salah, or Trent. I'm 50 points behind the leader of the mini league. Yeah, I mean, the mini league leader is probably going to play Salah. I'm going for Trent, but I don't think Jota's a bad choice. I think you can make a decision between either. What are my thoughts on Gabriel Jesus? So I know a lot of people are thinking about, let's say, moving Vardy to Gabriel Jesus. My issue with him is that I just don't think he's worth it in terms of his cost. So he's gotten 52 points, which is actually really good so far. And when we compare to other City midfielders, Gundogan is at 48, he's at 7.2, much cheaper. Foden's at 41, he's missed a lot of games. Bernardo Silva's already outscored Jesus, and that's kind of my main concern with Jesus. I just think he's a little bit of a waste of money. And as we've been saying with the forwards, it might actually just be better off with you going to people like King, going to players who are much cheaper as enablers to allow you to get a better midfield, because we've actually seen that the midfield have been more cost efficient basically as players. And we know, for example, with City, we're looking at clean sheet points and things like that. You're sure about captaincy? Everton is one of the worst defense now, so I'm thinking about a huge Salah score. I mean, I don't actually think Everton are one of the worst defenses. I think they did have a massive slip up versus Watford, but I wouldn't say that they've been awful defensively. I know Man City pretty much tore them apart, but I don't think it's useful to actually look at Trent as a defensive asset. He clearly is an offensive asset. He's provided assists and goals over the last few weeks, and you can't disregard that when you're considering how poor the Everton defense is. So I don't think it's more a case of, let's say, this is all about the Liverpool offense. I just think that there are ways that Everton can concede. And for me, yes, I am still captaining Trent Henry, just because you're curious. We'll see what happens in the next 40 minutes if I get convinced or I'm too scared and I go for Salah. Everyone is transferring Gallagher en masse. They all haven't watched Palace recently. MacArthur's injury is having a big impact on him, especially with Eze coming back and Millie playing. Yeah, I mean, the thing is with Conor Gallagher, he's a talismanic player, but he clearly does play centre mid, and we know that over the course of time, usually it's tough for centre mids to get consistent returns unless they play for a huge team, and they're going to inevitably there is going to inevitably be games where Crystal Palace will struggle and he'll have to play a little bit deeper than usual. What we've actually noticed is that Gallagher also does extremely well versus teams with who are trying to look to build, and he's actually been producing more from a counter-attacking point of view, where Crystal Palace are able to collapse and he makes the right decision on a counter-attack. I think when Crystal Palace are actually dominating the ball, we'll actually see him play much deeper, and that's why I think maybe during an easier fixture run, he's not the sweetest asset, whereas someone like Burnley, who always plays on the back foot, maybe that's kind of why I've gone for Cornet. Do you have a code for me to join your league? Yes, I do. So the league is here, LPLHGR. That's our league code. Ramsdale, start Tony or Livramento. I'd probably start Tony, my friend. Captain Salah or Antonio, what's everyone saying? I would say Salah. I just don't think there's enough backing behind Antonio. I think Brighton are still a quite formidable side. I'm not saying that Brighton will keep a clean sheet for sure, but I just think that this Liverpool team are creating so much that you're probably going to get something from Salah, whereas I won't say it's justified for Antonio. What website is that used for stats? So I actually like using FBref a lot. A lot of people also use this website called Understat. It really depends on what you like. I'm also looking at price aggregators. Most of the price increases aren't that interesting to me. I think Antonio dropping is going to be a huge... It's interesting that people are dropping Antonio versus Brighton. That's going to be a problem for me because I think I'm going to lose a little bit of value in him unless I transfer him sometime tonight. But I don't really see myself moving out of Antonio. We'll see what happens there. Jota's stats are skyrocketing and surpassing Salah. Should I captain him? Or honestly, I don't think there's a problem with captaining Jota. I think you're completely in the clear if you want to do that. Shaky Lamo, Jota's captain. As I said, same thing there. Yeah, if you guys can like the stream, that'd be really appreciated. Really nice to see a lot of new faces on the channel. So welcome aboard. Did you get a new camera? Yeah, I did actually. So that's probably why it looks clean. I'm sorry I've leaned into the camera so much. Salah Hattie this week. Honestly, like if you could predict the Hattie every time, I'll trust you, Rico. But I've gone for Trent for now. Who knows? Maybe Trent could go for a hat-trick of assists and provide something similar, right? With a clean sheet, we're about there. When are you looking at Twitter? Need suggestions? I'll be looking at Twitter in a quick second. What are my plans for free hit? It's double game week. I think I'll wait and see what happens exactly with the fixtures and how they're lining up. Isn't Cornet a bit of a long shot, a bit risky for you? I mean, is it really a long shot to captain someone? Sorry, not to captain, but to bring in someone who scored 5 goals in the Premier League in a very short amount of time. Cheers, Liam. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. So I keep my fingers crossed for your Trent Alexander-Arnold. I mean, let's be honest. If you're captaining Salah, if you're captaining Jota, inevitably it probably just means that other players will get hauls, right? So we'll see what happens. Any update on Saka? I don't actually have an update on him. Fran, will you reconsider putting Livermento over Tony as the first sub? Is there any specific reason why you want me to reconsider that, Jeff? So this is my first episode of the season. I used my free hit thinking this is a double game week. So how do you think I'll get on? Sanchez, Cancelo, Trent, James, Alonso, Reguilon. Is there not a better keeper this week than Sanchez? I wouldn't want to play Sanchez versus West Ham. Honestly, I'd be tempted by Guaita versus Leeds because that's quite a nice game. Alex Riley, thank you so much for the donation. Jimenez to /Mbumo to Bernardo /bench fodder for -4. I don't think this is the fixture to do that necessarily. I just think that right now I think you've got probably the last of Jimenez's good fixtures. I'd rather you probably roll the transfer. I know Bernardo has an okay game, but I think this is a good game to also spot whether or not Gundogan or Bernardo is more interesting for you. I know Mbumo has been a fraud, and Jimenez, as with most forwards, has been a fraud as well. I guess that's just my worry. I would rather you probably play Jimenez for the last of his good fixture, and then you can reconsider. To start Tony or Trossard, probably Tony. Diaz to Alonso and Foden for Bernardo for a hit. Yeah, I think if you're dealing with injury situations, that's not a bad transfer, especially since we've seen West Ham do quite well versus City, unfortunately. If I was anyone, I would captain Salah. It's pretty much guaranteed points. Yeah, I mean, Salah is guaranteed points. I just think that Jota, if you look at his stats, he's up there in terms of actually producing on a weekly basis. So I think he definitely deserves a shout. I agree. Tony has terrible statistics, but I'm just saying I don't see how Livermento has good statistics, if that makes sense. From an attacking point of view, he hasn't really produced too much from expected assists or expected goals. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, and I do think Southampton clean sheet is rather unlikely. I agree with Juco there. I'm gonna quickly move on to I would not move away from James, guys. He was in training, so I think the only thing that Tuchel has basically made a point to say is that he might be rested for a midweek fixture. I don't think James is suffering from some sort of long-term injury. I would not make that kind of side grade this week. I know Alonso seems tempting in the short term, but I would only go for Alonso if you're dropping someone else. I would not drop James for Alonso. I don't think Salah's getting rested. I'm kind of just tempting fate here and going for that move. But I will actually look at Twitter for now. Really just don't know if I should start King over Tony or even entertain the possibility of Saka being fit for Thursday. So you could try Saka being fit for Thursday, but it's still United. I'd probably be more interested in going for Tony. I just think the fixture is a lot nicer, and you're not dealing with the injury concern of Saka, and King really doesn't have a good fixture in my opinion. Harold, this next week I'm thinking of going Rafinha /Benrahma to Jota to Billy Gilmore. That will give me money for other transfers, for example, bring in Diaz. Interesting that you think about Diaz. I would definitely say that maybe another Chelsea fullback is probably the preferred option, but as things stand, I do like the move. I think going to Jota as soon as possible is the play. He's incredibly in form, and he's playing in basically a position where he's guaranteed assists or goals. Hi, Fran. Definitely need to upgrade my bench. 1 free transfer, 0 in the bank. Think of taking a hit, Foden to Gallagher and Marcel to Alonso. Yeah, I'd be happy with that too. I do think Gallagher is not going to be a guaranteed player, but and for me, the bigger problem in your team is going to be Mbumo. So that's kind of my one concern. But I wouldn't say no to going for a back four. The one concern, I guess, this week is James doesn't play, but Marcel doesn't play anyway, so I think you're covered there, so it's not a bad move. Chirag, so, okay, Fran, I have 1 transfer and 0.5 in the bank, but will I get 2 transfers? I do 0 transfers and move from Antonio and Rafinha simultaneously, or should I stick with this? Then, so I guess your question is, should you roll or should you make a transfer? So when I'm looking at your team, I actually think that your team is good to go this week. Tony coming off the bench for you, for me, is a nice move if James doesn't play. So I would actually say roll the transfer for sure. Agreed. Hey Fran, how's it going from Yassine? I honestly don't know what transfers to make. I took a hit last week to get James, and I don't have enough money to get Jota in one move, and Gray is dropping in price. I can't find any replacements for him at this price. What do you think I should do? Thanks. So I think clearly you need to move away from Chilwell. I would probably go to Alonso this week. The reason why is because you can actually pocket Alonso. Alonso is going to have a price rise, so you'll benefit from that. You'll actually have another player starting, so that means that you can play Cancelo, Alexander-Arnold, Alonso. Let's say James doesn't play for the meantime. Who else are we going to play? We're going to play Rafinha, Gallagher, Salah, and Smith-Rowe probably this week. Maybe Gray, to be honest. I'd probably lean towards Smith-Rowe. So we have a 3-4-3, basically, where we can play Kane, Tony, Jimenez. I would probably do that transfer because you'd have 0.7 in the bank. And then that 0.7 in the bank can probably improve Gray next week, if that makes sense. You're also in touching distance of... I mean, I also think that your bench is actually arguably a little bit too strong. So what I would say is that in the next week, you could do a hit, maybe drop Jimenez and Gray in one transfer, go into Jota next week, or you could do it this week as well. You could, but the thing is, I still like Jimenez's fixture versus Burnley. So I'm tempted to say go for Jota next week in a -4 where you take Jimenez and Gray out. And I think this week you just move away from Chilwell and go into Alonso. That might be a little bit better for you. Kool-Aid, what should be my bench and thoughts on getting Ronaldo or Sancho as Man United have a really good run of it? I think Ronaldo and Sancho are very, very interesting options. Nothing wrong with those players. What do you think about Sanchez to David De Gea in Gameweek 15? I think David De Gea is actually underpriced right now, especially if, let's say, we imagine that a good manager comes in and can actually change the effectiveness of the side. Right now, David De Gea ranks incredibly low in terms of all sorts of goalkeeper metrics. So that is kind of my worry. Carl is actually identical to mine. I think I must have missed it. Which player had a identical team to me? Rajan, should I bring in Willock or Fraser for Mbumo? I would not touch Willock or Fraser. I just don't think Newcastle produce enough on a game-to-game basis. Yes, sometimes they're kind of the goal affairs, such as the Brentford game, but I just don't think Willock or Fraser have been interesting whatsoever. I think they're way too out there as differentials, no underlying stats to back them, not even an eye test at this point in time. With Willock, you're going basically based on his last season run, and Fraser, his form from years ago, really. You still have your free transfer. Should you sell Reece James, or do you just start him, and if he doesn't play, Raf just comes on? Look, I don't want to transfer Reece James. He looks fine, guys. It's a short-term injury. You keep your transfer. Don't waste it, especially since you probably want to save your transfer, roll the transfer, and get out of someone like Jimenez, or even go out of Vardy this week. You've got 4.1 mil in the bank. I don't know how I got there. Honestly, why not just upgrade from Vardy to Kane this week if Vardy isn't going to play? It's not a bad move. Please spend an extra sec on my team in a real pickle right now. You transferred Foden out for Jota. Have another thought. I was thinking of getting Mbumo and Antonio out for Bilva, Bernardo Silva / Gundogan and ASM. Thoughts on this? Worth a hit. I'm a bigger fan of going for King than going for someone like say Maximan at this point in time. As far as the rest of your team, I think going for Jota is good. I wouldn't make any other transfers this week. Because the thing is, for me, Mbumo is the bigger problem child in the team. I'd try to address, let's say, maybe you could downsize Vardy and upgrade Mbumo, which is exactly what your plan is. But I know you want to go out of Antonio. I would probably rather keep Antonio because he's cheaper. Maybe move out of Vardy and then move out of Mbumo in one go. Ricky, hey Fran, Rico here. No more free transfers, no money in the bank. Plan is Raf / Kane to Bowen / R7, coinciding with the West Ham Man United fixture swing after Kane plays Norwich. Worried about Foden, thinking about maybe a Gundogan downgrade. There's no positive news by the weekend. Thoughts? Any other problems you see? Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think Foden should be fine by the weekend. I guess our question is what happens to your bench this week, and it is a bit thin. But I don't think, a -4 is that nice on this team. Yeah, I'd be happy for you to just keep it as it is and kind of live and die by Livermento and Brownhill. Big boy Adama, hey Fran, would you bring in Alonso for Diaz or for Livermento and go back for Armstrong? Yeah, I mean, I think your team definitely could benefit from a Chelsea defender, so I'd probably make that move. I'm going to quickly go back to YouTube chat for a second, guys, just to make sure that I actually cover any of the messages there. What is the reason behind Trent Alexander-Arnold captain? Yeah, exactly. Poor attacking potential from Everton. And I consider Trent Alexander-Arnold to be part of the Liverpool attack. So even if, let's say, they do quite well, I think he benefits from there. I also think that Everton have been incredibly poor versus set pieces, which is a specific area that Trent Alexander-Arnold can target. What will I do with Saka? I mean, I don't own Saka, but I think Saka, you have to kind of pay attention to whatever the injury news is. If it seems to be medium to long term, I think it's an easy move to Smith Rowe as a side grade, unfortunately. Alternatively, you can also probably stockpile that kind of money and maybe move up to, let's say, a Man City midfielder or Jota if you don't have him already. Can you bench Vardy for Trossard, Fran? I think that's fine, especially since Vardy seems to be benched. 3 out of the last 4 games at Goodison Park went 0-0. Yep, exactly. That's part of the reasoning as well. Lots of low-scoring games at Goodison Park. Sold Guaita for Ramsdale. Rolled 2 games was enough for me. Fair enough. That's fine. I would just still say that Guaita has the better fixture this week, which is why I wouldn't have done it this week. We've seen a lot of teams get clean sheets versus Leeds. I'm hoping Crystal Palace can do the same. Geronimus, love the content, mate. Just subbed Broya / for Leicester or Gallagher. I'd go for Gallagher, my friend. I just think it's a better fixture. Broya is not really guaranteed that many minutes. Jethro has said, who should you start, James, Mbumo, or Livramento? Look, I'm still tempted to start with James. I think that if he starts, it's in a good situation. Tuchel was, I don't think he basically put a position where it was guaranteed that James would miss the game. It was quite definitive that he had a knock, but I think James seems to be fine. I think you can start him because, for me, my point of view is that either he starts or he doesn't play. I don't think Watford will put Chelsea in a position where James has to come off the bench and actually contribute. And that's just kind of my opinion there. Maddison to Rafinha. I wouldn't go for Rafinha now, guys. The fixtures are getting a lot tougher for Rafinha, and Leeds just aren't playing very well. I, as a Rafinha owner, plan to move away from him in the near future. I'm going to quickly turn back to the Twitter messages for a quick second. Hi, Fran. Definitely need to upgrade my bench. 1 free transfer, 0 in the bank. Think of taking a hit. Foden to Gallagher and Marcel to Alonso. Okay, I think reply to that. If you had to move out of Mbumo, how would you advise it? Because you have 0 in the bank, I actually think that he has to go through a -4. Unfortunately, he has to be taken out through a hit with someone else. Who could you actually reduce in terms of price in your team? That's another question. I think that there's probably a space for you to downgrade Foden, potentially. I know that doesn't sound like good news, but that's a possibility for me, in my opinion, where if you downgrade Foden to another Man City midfielder, maybe you can upgrade Mbumo to someone just a bit more interesting than Mbumo at this point in time. You're rolling a transfer, downgrading Smith Rowe because you have Gallagher to get playable cheap 90 minutes to further better my team. Fair enough. I can understand that. Really nice to actually see someone's embrace the low score, like basically the minimalist striker formation. I think Tony on the bench is sensible. Interesting that people are going with the Livramento order. I don't think there's too much in it, to be honest. So that's fair enough. Mark Sakito, thoughts on this? Is my bench order fine? Thanks, mate. Let's have a look. Mbumo, King, and Brownhill. Yeah, I think that's fine. I might be tempted to go for King, to be honest. Watford have been quite creative as of late. But I wouldn't really change much about your team. I think the playing formation makes the most sense. I think Mbumo, unfortunately, has to go as soon as possible. Interesting that you have Mane, actually. So that's a lot of money stockpiled in your team. But still a huge differential, and arguably has been very talismanic in the last few weeks. You've got 2.0 in the bank. Can't tell how many transfers you have, but I think clearly a move away from Jimenez would be nice in the near future. I like having White in the team. Mendy is also where a lot of cash is stockpiled. Maybe a move to Ramsdale when the fixtures ease up for Arsenal could be interesting, so that you can actually get another Chelsea defender who's a little bit cheaper. I just feel like that is one of the issues with Mendy, where I think Rudiger is someone who might be a little bit more interesting. Sean, did Marcel to Alonso and Tony to King play Saka flagged or Livramento? Probably Livramento, unfortunately, just due to the Saka news. Justin, hey Fran, I'm planning on moving Foden to Gundogan this week because my bench is so weak. Do you see any other moves I should do? No, I think that's a solid move. You'd captain Mane if you had him. I mean, everyone seems interested in captaining someone else other than Salah, but it ends up actually being another Liverpool player. We'll see what happens. I'm going for Trent. It's a bit of a gamble, but you know, I'm happy to do it. For the sake of science. Not really, but we'll see what happens. Hi, Fran. Start Broya, Smith Rowe, or Mbumo. I would actually probably start. It's a tough question. I'd be tempted to start Smith Rowe or Broya. I just think Mbuma hasn't been interesting whatsoever. Thoughts on Lucas Moura? I mentioned actually previously in the stream, I think he's quite an interesting option. I just think we need to see a little bit more from Tottenham before I actually consider him as a viable asset, basically. But definitely very interesting and maybe a good hedge to someone like Son, who's quite expensive. Wilson or Josh King in? Probably Wilson. Rafinha, Livramento, and Norman to Alonso, Bowen, and Bissouma. Interesting. So I guess this is just to fix up your bench. I like the move. I guess you're going a little bit early on Bowen. That's my one worry. But if you have the ability to, let's say, bench Bowen versus Chelsea, then that's fair enough. Jota or Mo Salah captain. I think obviously the safest option, guys, is always going to be Salah. You're hedged in a sense by effective ownership. But I think Jota has great chances to haul. I think Trent has great options to haul, and that's kind of how I see things. Malcolm, hey man, hope you're good. A bit lost with who to start. Johnson versus Brighton could get a clean sheet as Brighton haven't done well up front, but at the same time West Ham haven't kept a clean sheet against Brighton since 2010. Good research. Then Reece likely bench, but don't really want him to come on for 20 minutes, so that's why I put him ahead of Tony Rafinha. Anything you would change? That's fair play. I'm maybe tempting fate a little bit by starting James myself, but if I think I would always encourage people to back their own logic. I think if you've subscribed to James playing 20 minutes, then I would be totally fine with what you've suggested. Tony or Mbeumo? Obviously, I would say that I've got maybe differing or a different point of view on James. I do think that James will probably not feature for the game. Because my hope is that Chelsea would be leading versus Watford quite early on. Tony or Mbeumo? Definitely Tony, I think. He's just been more interesting overall. Even though Mbeumo actually has maybe more shots, he just hasn't been clinical enough. I just don't think there's enough underlying... Maybe this is the week that Mbeumo hauls when everyone's thinking that this is his last chance, but he just hasn't been that interesting for me whatsoever. Saka out for Bernardo Silva, Gunnar or Cornet or Gallagher. So between the Cornet or Gallagher thing, I think Cornet is definitely much more risky. I think Gallagher is a little bit safer. I think Gallagher's underlying stats have been fantastic overall. I don't think there's a reason to really move away from him. But for me, Cornet is just a bit more explosive as an asset, and he's someone who I would like to play with as a differential for a few weeks. That's just my point of view. So it really depends on what kind of capacity you have in your squad to move away from. Because I would say Mbeumo is basically stockpiling a lot of funds that you might not need. And he's already a differential, so you might want to play it safer, but it's really up to yourself. Brainless. Top 10k, captain, play Tony, when to use free hit, squad. So I think in terms of free hit, I think Ben Krellin has put a decent guide with I think Fantasy Football Hub this year on how to play your chips. We might talk about chips in the near future, and I'll probably make a video on double game weeks in the near future just to kind of educate ourselves and also educate myself as I do the research for it. As to when we should play specific chips, and I'll discuss the free hit there. Obviously, I wouldn't free hit currently, but in terms of top 10k, playing Tony, I don't know. I think my issue is that, let's say if Vardy gets rotated, isn't that putting you in quite a tough situation? I guess ultimately, if James is someone who might not play, Tony comes in regardless, so it's not a huge deal. So I guess you're not probably in a huge pickle, because I don't think Tony is set for a fantastic haul versus Tottenham or anything by that nature. So I think you're free to go. Planning on getting Jimenez read by next week and Rafinha and Tony thereafter, but no idea who to replace them with. I think Jimenez is easy to move away from. If you, let's say, want to go for a Man City midfielder, it's quite easy to move into someone like Josh King, right? Or even Dennis if you want to play him for a much shorter period, because he will be gone for Afcon. So I think Josh King's interesting. You could downgrade that kind of piece and then maybe upgrade actually a defender in the subsequent week, or Rafinha if you'd like Rafinha into a Man City midfielder. I think is quite a good choice at this point in time. So I'm going to quickly go back to YouTube really quickly. People are asking, hey man, is it worth keeping Bernardo or should I transfer out to Jota for a hit? I wouldn't transfer Bernardo out to Jota for a hit. I think it's a good fixture for City. I wouldn't really be tempted to move out to Bernardo this week, even though the fixture is not bad. We've also mentioned that Everton have been quite defensive versus Liverpool in the last few games, in the last few years as well. So that's quite interesting for me. Ahmed, hey Fran, -4 for Jota and Newcastle forward. What do you think? Also, Wilson or St. Maximin, please. I would actually probably say that the Newcastle forwards might be a boat I'd like to miss. I just don't think this Newcastle team has produced enough in the last few games under Eddie Howe to justify putting our funds into them, because the Newcastle forwards are still quite expensive in my opinion, especially when actually the Watford players have been more interesting. So, and going back to the point on Dennis that Omar raised, I think it might be maybe partly due to form. So we'll have to kind of keep our tabs on Dennis. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but if we look at expected goals, right, on a per 90 basis, I mean, Josh King and Dennis have fantastic statistics, and they've played a lot of minutes in the Premier League. These kind of stats are really out of this world. I think Josh King particularly is benefiting from penalties, but even if we, let's say, take penalties aside, both have done incredibly well. They're a little bit tighter in this metric, and maybe you could actually argue that Dennis has been a little bit more instrumental, a little bit more clinical, but they both produced very, very good numbers in recent weeks, and I actually think that they're much better options than Newcastle, who've provided much less chances. And you also have to factor in the new manager effect, right? How have Newcastle played under Howe, and how have Watford played under Ranieri? I would say under Ranieri, Watford have been much more creative. I don't think they're a great team. You know, they're defensively incredibly poor. I would try and attack Watford defense and attack Newcastle defense. But yeah, from attacking point of view, I would say those cheaper Watford forwards are the way to go. Can we rely on Hwang or bench him? I mean, you could probably try. This is the last week to rely on Hwang, basically. So it's up to you. I don't really know who's on your bench, so it depends on what happens. What are good Jimenez replacements? So as I've discussed, mostly just these kind of Watford options are the most interesting for me at this point in time. Is it too late to jump on the Jota train? I would say absolutely not. I would still go for... I would still drop Foden for Jota. I've done it personally myself. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think if you want to go for a Man City midfield in the near future, you probably just move away from Jimenez. I'm going to quickly go through the other tweets from the message requests. Hey, love the videos. What would you get? Thank you very much for the kind words. What would you recommend you do here once you get Jota in soon, but would prefer not to take another double hit? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't take a double hit for Jota. You've got one free transfer. Probably the move is to go away from Rafinha. I guess you don't want to go away from St. Maximin this week because Norwich... The thing is, Norwich have actually looked quite good recently, which is why I think that perhaps the hype over getting a Newcastle forward for this specific fixture has somewhat fizzled for me, but we'll see what happens there. So Jota, how much does he actually cost right now? I think Jota's quite expensive though, right? 7.7 maybe? 7.8 actually, wow, okay, so he's 1.2 mil over Rafinha, so we kind of need 1 million to make way, and you're probably not going to take, say, Maximin out of your team. I think the structure you've put on over your team has kind of locked you in, because the question for Jota is going to be whether you want to drop Antonio. If you want to drop Antonio, then I think the option to go for Jota is there for you, and you can go for King, put King on the bench, play the rest of your team, play the back four, play the midfield four, and then just play the two strikers in Hwang and St. Maximin. But it's really up to you when to get Jota out. I don't think we should be thinking about getting Jota out at all. I think he's in fantastic form. And the thing is, like, as I mentioned in recent weeks, I would say, you know, all of us talk about Jota and his limited minutes, but if we look at just flat stats, you know, he's top 3 in the league in terms of expected goals, and he's played much less minutes than Mane and Salah. And then he obviously leads the league in expected goals per 90, which is obviously what we expect to see because he is more of a super sub at times when Firmino plays. But we can see that just based on flat stats that he's performed extremely well. He's definitely scored several goals. He's missed, of course, a sitter, which I think a lot of people seem to have been worried about. But, you know, you have to look at what someone's producing over the course of the season. I think Jota is very capable of doing well. I don't think there's any reason for us to think about taking him out of our teams. What do you think of this team? Any improvement? Thank you. Let's see. So I would say for this week, I wouldn't really change too much. I wouldn't roll. I think Rafinha has an okay fixture at this point in time. I think it's about maybe thinking about ways to move out of Rafinha as the Leeds fixtures get tough, ways to move out of Tony as the fixtures get tough. And as we discussed, the enablers are there and the pivots, as I said. So once you, let's say, move out of Tony into someone like King or Dennis, very easy to move into a Man City midfielder for Rafinha in a few weeks' time. And the Man City fixtures are very, very good. I'm going to quickly go back to YouTube chat for a quick second. Let's see what happens there. And also, I'm just going to quickly put a captaincy poll at this point in time. So let's go with Salah, Jota, maybe we'll say Trent, and I think people would probably be interested in Kane. So let's actually see what the captaincies are like, because that would be quite interesting for me to have a look. Going back to the message requests, though, 2 free transfers, no clear transfers that I see. Thoughts on Norman or many to Bissouma or even Martinelli? Yeah, that's really unfortunate with the bench. I would probably say Bissouma is the most sensible option. I don't think there's anything else to really discuss here, if that's the play. And then maybe you can just roll, I suppose. Yeah, I would roll the transfer after that. Decent position to be in, though, actually. Who to start? Smith Rowe or Mbeumo? Bench order okay. Mbeumo on the bench. Yeah, I think that's fine. Special agent. Hi, Fran. Livramento and Mbeumo to Alonso and Gundogan for a hit. What do you think? Livramento and Mbeumo to Alonso and Gundogan. Honestly, I actually think those are very interesting transfers. Nice way to get away of Mbeumo. Nice way to get out of Livramento, especially during their kind of bad defensive run. Any tips on what to do? Captaincy on Salah. I only have 0.2 in the bank. Right. Yeah, so the tricky thing is going to be Mbeumo. I think you probably ride with Mbeumo here. Look at it as an opportunity to be the last week to live with Mbeumo in your team, and then maybe move him out from Vardy. Alternatively, you can move away from Vardy if you'd like, because of the resting issues. But I think the issue with your team is that with the 3-man structure you have, you probably want to keep Son for the next few game weeks. Vardy also has still some decent fixtures, but I think one of them has to make way in terms of Vardy and Son so that you can actually get out of Mbeumo, because right now the issue of the 3-man structure is it makes you incredibly rigid. One asset that I think you're missing is definitely Cancelo. Yes, of course, he's very close to a suspension with another yellow card in the distance. Maybe you can actually wait for him to serve his suspension if you'd like to do that. But that could potentially be a long time, because players are definitely aware of the fact of how many yellow cards they're holding at one time. But yeah, I'd say definitely look at moving away from one of the 3-man assets into moving away Mbeumo, and maybe that just means rolling the transfer this week. Cronin, so thoughts, transferred Son plus Christensen for Bernardo and Trent. Yep, love the moves. You've gone for Trent captaincy. Don't blame me if the Trent captaincy fails, by the way, guys. So everyone's gone for Salah, which is very reasonable. Jota was the second option, and then Trent was the third option. I think that pretty much aligns with my conception of things in terms of the priorities, but we'll see what happens. I'm tempted to go with Trent this week. I just think it might be a low-scoring game, and he might benefit from that kind of circumstance. You've got 1 transfer and 0.2 in the bank. Any thoughts? Thinking about bringing someone in for Foden. I don't know, guys. I'm so tempted to put my captaincy back on Salah. Should I put my captaincy back on Salah? Triple captain Salah, Ewan. You're a bit mental. Benteke or St. Maximin? I'd probably play St. Maximin in this fixture. Honestly, I'd try to play both. But if you mean a transfer in, I'd probably go for Benteke. Guys, you want to captain Jota, but you're scared. Honestly, I'm getting scared right now with the Trent captaincy, so we'll see what happens. James took a knock. Should you bench him and bring on Omobamidele? I would still probably say that James is worth starting in your team, Hojak. I've done it myself. I think Liverpool are much better rover. I completely agree. I can show my bench. Yeah, I can. So Tony's first bench for me. Is Bernardo nailed? I would say yes, he is. I would say he's nailed. Whether he actually is in kind of elite goal-scoring positions from a game-to-game basis, no. But I think is he kind of pegged on for an assist or a goal every week? I would say pretty close to that, yes. I'm going to quickly try to go through all the Twitter tweets. I might not go through all of them very quickly. Do you have any suggestions for my team? Struggling to find Foden replacements. I think the easiest Foden replacements is simply side grading to other midfielders, and I wouldn't start Smith Rowe over Benteke, no. Roll a transfer or Tony and Mbeumo for Gundogan and King. 0.4 on the bank, got 1 free transfer. I would roll a transfer, my friend. Imran. Think about moving out of Foden and want a better bench option. Opinion 2.9 in the bank. Anything you would change? Yeah, I mean, you could side grade Foden away this week, especially since I guess your bench is in a bit of a tough spot, right? Because let's say if James doesn't play, you want Tony to come on. You don't really want Liverpool to play. Maybe you move Foden to someone like Gundogan. I think that'll be quite interesting. Should you play Livermento or James? I would probably say James. Um, I would get, yeah, I like Gundogan as an option for sure. Cream cheese bagel thoughts, please. I've used wildcards so we can make changes. Okay, so you've gone for a wildcard here. I'm not a huge fan of Reguilon, I have to admit. I don't actually think I still think that you'd like to go for James on a wild card. I'm personally not a big fan of the 3-man structure at all. I think Broja hasn't played too many games recently, which is why I'm worried about having him in my team. Did you play in the last match? Or yeah, so they played kind of a front three. Didn't work too well. I just think that King's definitely a good option. Bench is totally fine. It's a bit thin. Yeah, I'm just not very sold on the 3-man structure. I just think that you want to make. I would either drop one of Lukaku or Son. I just don't think. I just don't think it's a viable or efficient way of playing fantasy, especially since your captaincies might actually be resting within Liverpool players who are actually quite well priced. And if there's no reason for you to, let's say, alternate captaincies between Son and Lukaku, I can't see a reason for you to actually go for a 3-man. I'm just not a big fan of it. FPL Aiden, hello mate. In the stream, what would you do here? Need a way to fit in Jota and Alonso. Awesome. So I'd probably roll the transfer, get out of, but I think it has to be so. Like for me, the question I would say is, do you want to benefit from the last week of Jimenez? But I would say no. I would say you're probably going to move away from Jimenez, and that's your way out of Jota. You could maybe move out to Jimenez, keep Tony in your team, move Jimenez to someone like King, and then upgrade someone like Rafinha in the next week. Since his fixtures are drying up, and maybe you'd like to go for Jota sooner than later. I did, yeah. So should I play Gray now that he's back? Also, tell me about Huang. Can we rely on? I don't think we can necessarily rely on Huang. He's not been very interesting, but I would say with Gray, he's got a very tough fixture ahead of him. So it's not like it's a great game to really deal with. So I would probably say you just stick with Huang because he's probably more pegged on to actually get an attacking contribution. This Burnley side haven't been elite defensively at all. Hi, Fran. Thinking about Mendy to Guaita and buy a good striker. Now it's at 1.5. I would say, yeah, Mendy to Ramsdale is probably something I would prefer. That's my opinion. Buying a good striker, I don't think you necessarily have to do that. I actually think I really like your midfield setup. I really like your back four as well. So I'd prefer you rather spend money on. I mean, you could upgrade another striker, but it would just be another bench piece, right? At this point in time, you've got 5 really good midfielders. Maybe you could upgrade Walker, potentially. Maybe Alonso is a little bit more interesting. I wouldn't say it's an upgrade necessarily, but because you're kind of foregoing Mendy in the keeper position, I guess you've got room for another Chelsea defender. I guess it's up to you to decide whether you actually prefer a Chelsea or City defender, but I would actually say a Chelsea or City defender is a little bit interesting. Trent, final captain. Yeah, guys. All right. I'm going to spend the next 2 minutes thinking about my captaincy. Stress, mate. Stress. Should I just keep it simple and go for Salah? I just think Everton have been terrible. I just think Everton have been so terrible. But it will be pain. It will be pain. All right, guys. I'll do it. I'm sticking with the Trent captaincy. You know, you ride or die with these things, so it's whatever. I'm gonna stick with FPL Lone Wolf and go for the Trent captaincy. He's given me a bit of confidence. So have you guys in the chat. Thank you so much. We're gonna do it. Always just Capsula, never get fancy. Always just Capsula, never get fancy, never get fancy. Salah will be angry. Oh. Alright, guys. Maybe I'll just go Salah. Keep it simple. Yikes, guys. I've just put it on Salah. Uh, have I baited you? I could still go Trent. Still a couple seconds on the clock. Ah, whatever. Let's just put it on. Let's just put on Trent. Let's put on Trent. I've said that. Oh no! Has it updated? Okay, yeah. I've gone for Trent, guys. All right, let's go back, Trent. Let's just do it. Let's just put Trent. Whew. Okay. Oh, the game's updating. Have I made a massive mistake? Right, at least we provided content for you guys. So if you guys could like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. If I get a massive red arrow, I'm totally fine. Yeah, let's do it. Let's just go for Trent. Thank you guys so much for joining the stream as well. It was a pleasure to have you guys. Pookie a better captain. Hey, I don't have Pookie in my team, so I wasn't gonna take a -4 for him, right? So, yeah, fair enough. I mean, we've gone for Trent. Let's just enjoy the game week. Let's enjoy some football. If it doesn't work out, I guess you can just blame me. 8:15 tomorrow. It's a late game as well. It'll be stressful. I wonder if I can sleep at night. At least I didn't bottle it, right? So we've done that. I basically flopped my captaincy between Salah and Trent in the last minute. So I went Salah for a brief second, and then I went back to Trent because you don't want to back out on decisions that you made. I'm just gonna comment. That was very stress-inducing. I don't think I'll tempt the. I just think honestly Everton have been so bad defensively. I know it's a derby, but a lot of derbies have ended 0-0, and I just think Everton are so poor. I just hope Demarai Gray doesn't show me up or something tomorrow. Let's hope that Trent can also produce on the offensive end as well. For those people going for Jota, I also think it's a fantastic captaincy. So good luck to you guys. If anyone has like Son and Kane as captaincy options, very interesting. Salah's the best player in the world right now. You said it yourself. I mean, you're right, but the thing is, it's not like you're the best player in the world every game, right? You're the best player in the world because of what you produce over the course of many games and many fixtures. Wanted to know if you believe the Vardy rotation. I don't think Vardy's a sell, but I do believe in the Vardy rotation. XG chain from Understat. I actually haven't looked at that too much, Mikhail. So I'll have a look at that stat, and I'll get back to you next week, and probably you can ask the question. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining the stream as well. Nice to see Asian fans. I'm actually from Asia myself. I'm from Hong Kong, or at least I'm half Spanish and half Hong Kong. Wanted to know if you believe. Sorry, I've responded to that question already. Captain Trent or Salah. I mean, it's a bit late, but I've gone for Trent. So yeah. You'll know where to find me if Liverpool lose their clean sheet tomorrow. All right. I think probably what is the effective owner? I'd love to see the effective ownership. Akshat, how are you doing, man? Nice to see it. Akil and you guys are watching the channel. I hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world. Nice to see you as well. Thank you so much, by the way. Will Benteke play? I'm almost certain he plays because he's basically further in priority than Eduard, and that's how things are. Chirac, I support Real Madrid too. Fran, great choice. Yeah, I mean, inevitably, actually, my family from my dad's side are based in Madrid, so they've been Real Madrid fans for life. The link to both the stat websites, please. I can't actually type links in chat, but it's FBref and Understat, so you can just Google it yourself, Jangsta, and have a look at that. It's a gamble, guys, but I still own Salah, right? He's still a player in my team. Hopefully, he doesn't have the tally of God. I don't want Liverpool to lose their clean sheet, Raphael, so Let's not talk about that. I don't think Salah's getting a rest, but you know, if Klopp wants to rest him, that's fine by me. Great move for Trent. You're a beast. I wasn't that brave. I mean, I'm doing it for the content, guys. So if I completely go crashing down, at least it's not going to be probably as bad, hopefully, as when people captained Havertz. Maybe I'll have to bite my words again on that. We'll see what happens and what Salah produces. The scenes when Liverpool win 3-1 and Trent scores a hat-trick is what you're saying. I agree. Yeah. Playing Rafinha and Cornet and benching Tony and Gallagher, good move. I think that's a good move. I don't think Trent will get a goal, but as I said, I think a good way for Trent to actually produce in the game is set pieces. I would get copyright struck probably, but if I wanted to, if you guys wanted to take a good look at some of Everton's conceded goals this season, and a lot of that have come from set pieces. So it's quite interesting. Maddison in the coming weeks, I think, yeah. So the thing with Leicester is that they always like to change their formation at different times in the season, and they actually start to pick up a run of games, and that's usually backed by, let's say, a player being inspired within a certain structure, and I think Maddison could be that player. I still need to see more from him, especially in this upcoming Southampton game. I'll give him a bit of an eye test, and I'll let you guys know who's going to be Everton's 94 Lanzini. Yeah, okay, too cool to live. I know. I played it fancy. I apologize if I was wrong, but you know, it happens. Trent set pieces matter a lot. I absolutely agree. It's hard to climb with the rank if you're captaining Salah every week. I mean, I would disagree, right? Because I think there are a lot of assets. For example, like if I look at my team, Cornet is someone who has very, very low ownership. He's someone that you can, like, you're playing 11 will actually give you more than enough, in my opinion, to change your rank. For example, last week, two of my players didn't play. Like from the Burnley-Tottenham game, I missed out on Cornet and Kane, and that actually led me to getting a very minimal red arrow. Thanks for the good luck with Trent Alexander-Arnold. Greetings from Houston. Nice to see American users as well. Really cool. Bernardo or Gundogan. It depends on basically the KDB news and the KDB impacts. And for me, the issue with Bernardo is that he's almost played to kind of fill holes within the Man City team at times, and we've seen him play a mixture of left wing, right centre mid, and things like that. So that's the one issue with Bernardo. I don't think you can say that he has consistent holes, whereas Gundogan plays a much more set position where he makes these kind of deep lying runs. His underlying stats are actually a little bit better than Bernardo's, but I do think that there is a point to be made with Kevin De Bruyne coming back and maybe that having an impact on Gundogan and his stats. You bought Bowen for Gallagher. Fair enough. When you say Bowen for Gallagher, do you mean you've dropped Gallagher? It's not enough that I succeed, others should fail. I hope someone takes a knock before match. Hojack Borsman. Honestly, mate, I agree with you. Yeah, if Salah could take a knock, that would be fine. Just a 1 week knock. That would be appreciated. Any idea what percent own all three of Trent, Salah, and Jota? I remember last week it was just 6%. That's interesting. Is it really that low? I think this week a lot of people have gone Jota though. Remember that Jota's price rose, I think, double this week, right? So I got him at 7.5. He's now at 7.8. What were the statistics in terms? I don't actually know how many people transferred him in. So we'll have to see what happens there. I was so sad about this though. Cornet and Kane last week really killed me. Really killed me. Should we be thinking about Afcon? Yeah, we should, right? But like, let me just remind myself of the Afcon dates. I think it's like mid-January. So 9th January to 6th February, sorry. I believe the fixture period in terms of game weeks, right? We can't actually look at the fixtures because it's updating at this point in time. Just go on any random website. Probably better to actually look at Ben Crellin's spreadsheets, to be honest. Or we can actually just look at EPL Live. So we've got plenty of match days before the January game. So I wouldn't really put Afcon into your head until that. I mean, match day 22, we've got plenty of time before that happens, and you've got chips to play in between those periods and things like that. So I wouldn't worry too much obviously it's a long stint. So like once the players leave for Afcon, then you are missing them for 2, 3, probably around, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 game weeks. Not a huge kind of outlay, but I think people who've been planning so far ahead for Afcon might be burnt, right? Because we all have Salah on our team. Obviously, you don't want to take too many, I guess, African players at one time because you'll have to transfer them out slowly. But I think at this point in time, you're probably good to go with actually not thinking about Afcon, as long as you don't basically transfer in, let's say, a full African team, or a full Afcon participating team, basically. Which I don't think you will, so that's not a huge issue, I think, from your point of view. So yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about that. When will double game week start? I think 21 is one of those. You missed the deadline, Bunny. What's happened there? Took a -4 from Huang to Kane. Last week was surprisingly low before Jota's haul. Exactly, yeah, Jota's ownership was very, very low. I was one of those idiots that you might call who dropped Jota at one point in time. The double game week, you can actually look at Ben Crellin's spreadsheets. He kind of makes guesstimates in a sense of when double game weeks come. I think 21 is the soonest one. You captain Trent, you're scared now, let's hope. I mean, look, I'm scared too. At least I own Salah. And you quit captaining differentials for the sake of your own mental health. Yeah, it's going to be tough tomorrow whenever the ball gets to Salah. So let's just hope Salah calms down. The thing is, Finn, I think the derby is quite an important fixture. I think Salah will definitely want to play in that fixture, so that might change things. I ended up captaining Trent. There was a brief second where I changed it to Salah, and then in the last second, in the dying seconds of this week and the deadline, I actually switched it back to Trent. Oh no, Bunny, I'm so sorry about that. But I'll tell you what is at 7:30 p.m. though. It's the Newcastle vs Norwich game, so I apologize about that. I hope you have the Salah captaincy and nothing too crazy happened. All right, this is another brave soul who's gone for the Trent captaincy. Should you save a transfer this week? Did you ask me that question after the deadline? So I think that's the problem. I guess do you mean game week 15? I'd probably say wait for the news, Colin, so before you make a decision. But I'd say I'd probably like to move away from Mbumo, ideally. We'll see what happens there, though. Just while I have you guys here, are you guys interested in a specific type of video? And yeah, we're all in this together. All your knee-jerk moves don't end well, so it's good you hold on to your initial decision. I agree with that, actually. I think there was a week where I was deciding between Ronaldo and Antonio captaincy. I was pegged on for Antonio for most of the week, and then I ended up going Ronaldo, and then kind of got destroyed by that, because that was the period where Ronaldo was getting multiple blanks. I can't believe I had the balls to captain Kane over the Liverpool boys. Mate, you've got plenty. Did anyone else get a massive red arrow for no reason last week because they lost 3 players to a random game? I lost 2 players, and yeah, I got a half red arrow. I suppose it wasn't that significant. It wasn't massive. Just hoping for the players owned to actually play. Probably a low scoring. Hey, honestly, like as someone who didn't have 2 players in the last game week, that's definitely something I back. I mean, like honestly, last week I had Cornet ownership like around 2%. Like that would have been a huge differential for me. And then obviously Kane last week was still a very good differential as well, 36%. And in the end, I made a -4 to get Jota, which was a good decision. But then Liverpool, obviously, I knew was going to get no points, which is deliberately why I didn't play him. And then I knew Chelsea were probably going to lose their clean sheet, so I didn't want to change anyone in for Chilwell. So, and ultimately, if you guys watched the game, you know it didn't make sense to go Alonso or James at that point in time. So yeah, I mean, overall did well with the transfers, but was unfortunate with the Burnley Tottenham game. Unfortunately, I'm not a weatherman, and I can't predict the weather, and you just have to kind of put it down to the fact that at the end of the day, FPL is a very luck-based game as well. You can make good, educated decisions, but you won't cover yourself off of everything. There's going to be variance. There's going to be risk, inevitably, with FPL. And there's nothing you can really do about that, right? You just have to kind of take the blows as they come, really. Most people did get greens, though, it seems, because they have Ramsdale on their team, which is fine. I'm one of those guys who made a bit of a knee-jerk transfer to Guaita. I'll hold my hands up and say that was a mistake, so I'll learn from it. You're 900 already in my mini league, more than 100 points a league. ahead from everyone. Honestly, Shirag, I'm so happy for you, because you're ahead of me right now, and my goal really is that you guys make better decisions. Hope that I provide good advice. I hope I can help you guys make better decisions, and I can also learn as a manager as well from my journey, and then impart any advice that I can to you guys. And then if you guys do well, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed, the content, and you'll stick around, and you feel like the content benefits you, and that's pretty much my goal. My goal isn't really to win fantasy, although massive shoutouts to FPL Focal and his fantastic run so far. So awesome to see like a YouTuber actually like documenting his journey at a top rank, so that's crazy. Video suggestions, what to prioritize, capturing a price rise or retaining a player for short-term game. Yeah, I can definitely do a kind of basically analysis on the math behind price rises. That's something that would be quite interesting for me to look at, I think. But I would probably be more tempted towards putting that video out for the next season, just because I feel that, as most people know, actually, price rises matter much less as the season progresses. Price rises are much more significant, I think, in terms of how they should shape your decision making on a week-to-week basis early on in the year. I think you should be chasing good players in the mid-season and in the late parts of the season, as opposed to chasing transfer value. Whereas at the start of the season, I know there's definitely a lot of top 100 managers and players who play in a style where they try to accumulate as much value as possible. I played last year completely blind. I wasn't looking at any news, wasn't looking at any press conferences. Every week I was just eye testing players, because at the time I was just making a football tactics channel and just looking at post-match reviews of games and making kind of a retrospective analysis on specific games. And I got a top 50k rank, which is not huge. It's a pretty, I guess, average rank. But most of my decisions were informed by me making -4s, -8s, which I won't do as often this season, because I guess I'm a little bit more educated. I made a lot of mistakes last year. All my chip plays were bad. My second half of the season was really, really bad last season, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure I got like a single-digit haul from my bench boost. I think I used my chips incorrectly, definitely for the free hit. Picked a really, really lackluster blank, team in a blank game week. And then I think I didn't capitalize on my wild card whatsoever. I did the classic kind of rookie mistake of going for 2 good keepers, rotating them, even though the fixtures looked good in terms of the pairing, which is once again something I'll learn. But those kind of things are nice, and here I am making content, but obviously trying to get better as much as possible, so that I can actually give good advice to you guys. Anka says, my goal to beat my husband, that's all I want. He's only 17 points behind, so another Kane plus Son blank, I'm toast. I mean, I think Kane plus Son should haul. The next 3 weeks are going to be good. My OR last season was 50k. Married a fellow FPL nerd. Goals. Enjoy the stream. I should actually try to get my fiance to actually get into FPL. A video on common FPL mistakes would be good too. I think that's a good idea. I think like a good analysis. But those sorts of things I think would be nice at the start of the season, because I feel like, we've already come, in a sense, 14 game weeks so far, and we've probably learned a lot from our mistakes, and from that we probably learned quite a bit. I think it'd be nice to educate players maybe at the start of next season. But I could also do that when we have a bit more of a break. It's just that right now the fixture schedule is so hectic that it's really hard to think about making more miscellaneous videos. I'll definitely think about that though. Can you play free hit and triple captain chips in the same game? No, you can't. You can't play those hits together. Okay, let's actually look at free hits. And first of all, I would actually recommend all of you guys to follow Ben Krellin on Twitter. He is fantastic. He basically makes this beautiful spreadsheet here, which basically is something that looks incredibly complicated, I must add, but you can rely on the key here to actually tell when potential double game weeks are, when double game weeks are, and he's basically scheduled FPL in a sense where you can now see what the double game weeks are. So this fixture schedule is basically a guesstimation, in a sense, of what specific things we'll be looking forward to in future game weeks. So cup fixtures, for example, are reflected here. More cup fixtures in terms of the FA Cup here. This is obviously the EFL Cup. double game week, they're actually, I think, more situated towards the end of the season. So a lot of people are actually thinking of, let's say, playing a wild card, maybe game week 35 here, and then thinking about capitalizing on things like that. So, for example, a lot of people are planning, let's say, to wild card maybe around here, because the idea behind the wild card at this point in time is that hopefully your game week 35 wildcard would situate yourself for game week 37, and maybe if you 3-hit in this game week for this double game week, you'll have like the perfect team possible for this game week, for this double game week, and you can revert back to a playing team where basically your plan in game week 35 and 37 is to make sure that your game week 35 wildcard situates yourself well for the 37 and 38 fixtures, and then you basically just do a complete free hit on 36, and you have no regard for 36 in your 35 planning. So that's a possibility. Other kind of game weeks will appear. As you can see here, game week 33 seems to be a potential double game week. This is due to the fact of FA Cup and EFL Cup impacts, but we don't know, how significant that will be until cup fixtures happen and we know how deep some teams are running into their stages of their competition. But as I said, this is a fantastic spreadsheet, fantastic utility source. Ben Crellin is someone who does fantastic work. I think he's also made a transfer planner as well. I don't think that's necessary for you guys, but I think definitely looking at, I think Fantasy Football Hub did make a brief guide in terms of how to use your chips this season. And I'll probably actually refer to that video when I actually make my own chips video, but we'll see what happens there. But I hope that helps you guys in terms of another resource to look at for the near future. That's a lot of future planning, but it once again tells you that you don't necessarily need to look at the near future for chips. Chips can be played, unfortunately, very late in the season because the season is so long and you only get very few chips. I think I was tuning into, let's say, FPL Black Box lately, and I did know that Az and Mark were talking about expanding the use of chips, maybe making sure that you have 2 free hits in a season, so that you can actually be incentivized to use them a little bit more frequently, and it doesn't feel like you're all forced to use it at the same time. Because the beauty of chips is that hopefully there's a scenario in the world where you can actually use them at different times and you can benefit from that. Some people, for example, I think started the season with a bench boost on game week 1. That's a very extravagant move. We saw, for example, FPL Focal do a bench boost, I think, a few weeks back, that catapulted him to, within the top 20 or top 100 in the world, and he's done incredibly well since. So you can always find times to avoid avoiding the best opportune times, or most opportune times rather, to play chips. But when, for example, let's say your team structure fits it. For example, a lot of people this week might actually have a good bench boost on their hands. I would actually say that's probably not the case because a lot of people own Tony and Livermento and they don't have good fixtures this week. But yeah, especially, for example, in that kind of game week where Foster had a miraculous game versus Arsenal with a penalty save. Those are the kind of weeks where it sometimes you do get rewarded for going or straying away from the norm, but at the same time people could maybe equalize over the course in time. So I would say have a look as well at how much percentage of the player population have already used their chips, because that does impact things. Was I actually showing you Ben Crellin's cheat sheet? I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't actually show it to you guys. Let me actually show that to you guys. I think I missed out on that. My bad. God, I'm an idiot. All right, so let's just show that again. So basically, he's provided a key. If you go on his Twitter, which you should give him a follow, check out this kind of link here. Fantastic resource. Basically, a spreadsheet predicting what happens. So he's basically denominated things by color. So you'll see that potential cup conflicts will come up here, where, for example, there are EFL and FA Cup games. He's basically guessing potential double game weeks and then also a double game week. So as I was saying, basically in around game week 36, there's going to be a double game week here, 100%. So if you play a wild card game week 35 and you plan for 37, 38, you could have basically a god tier haul on 36, and put yourself in the best possible scenario to finish the season on a high and play 2 great fixtures at this point in time. Great to see you guys as well here. A lot of anonymous badgers, bats, beavers. Can't even pronounce the last 2 things, so I'm not going to even bother. But as you can see, so this is a very good resource. And also, for example, here, potential blank is interesting. Blank game weeks is something that you have to think about too. Some people like free hitting on blank game weeks. I've actually been burned by playing a free hit on a blank game week. I actually think that if your team doesn't have too many people missing, you should forget about the blank game week and just basically see that game week as a write-off, because the dividends, and maybe also what happens with the blank game weeks is people think so short term with the blank game weeks that they end up kind of capitulating their team in a sense, because there's so many fixtures after that, and then you have a double game week as well, where you probably want to plan more towards the double game weeks. The double game weeks are basically a higher potential for points, and that's better off. Yeah, exactly. FPL Focal did shoot up to the rank after the bench boost, and the thing is, you could be bench boosting later in the season. You could maybe catch up to him. He's done fantastically. Sorry, by the way, for not sharing the spreadsheet. That was a pretty idiotic thing to do. But yeah, hope you guys benefit from that resource. I wasn't actually showing the key, so the key is actually towards the right hand side. So if you can look towards the left hand side of the screen, the key is here. So he basically color denominates the game week. So as you can see here, game week 33 seems to be a potential double game week as an example. So those are the kind of things you want to look out for as an FPL manager. And that's pretty much it in terms of the advice that I have to give from that kind of point of view. Thinking about moving to a Man United asset soon, maybe Rashford. What do you think? I would actually say Sancho seems a little bit more interesting. Once again, I think we need to wait for Rangnick to come in, because basically I think Carrick is going to manage Man United for the Arsenal fixture. So that's not going to tell us anything in terms of how this Man United team will change in the near future. So I would say avoid looking at Man United assets until after maybe Rangnick's first 2 games in charge. Now, the one thing is, let's say if FPL has loaded. No, it hasn't. If we look at Man United fixtures, I think the one issue, right, is after the Crystal Palace game is immediately this nice fixture run where we have basically a sea of green and white with Norwich, Brentford, Brighton, Newcastle, Burnley, Wolves, Aston Villa, West Ham, Burnley, etc., Southampton, Leeds. I mean, like, literally a terrible run. I mean, terrific run until City. We only probably get one game to eye test United here. I would like to see what happens with Rani, because I know a lot of people have been talking about judge and press, a lot of people talking about pressing, but you still have Ronaldo in your team. And the thing is, when he actually made his first statement, he did mention that he would make the most out of his team, and he did note the fact that he had experienced players and some young players. So I think he will actually combine a mix of both at United. And but right now we can consider them tough games, but we all know that a competent manager can turn around this United team. I mean, ultimately last season, this is a team that still got top 3, top 4, and did incredibly well, even under Ole. So that's the one thing. Yeah, I mean, Rashford actually performed quite well, I think, once he came back from injury, but then he's kind of been shut out from the side once again, and that was probably due to Ole maybe just being under fire as a manager and I don't know, thinking about other decisions. But Sancho has looked quite interesting. But as I say, it's just worth waiting for Rangnick to come in and for us to actually see what he plays in this kind of Man United Crystal Palace game. Such a shame that we won't get to see him 2 times before the Norwich game, but we have to make some educated decisions and some guesses as well. But all right, guys, that's it probably for me for this week. I really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Once again, if Hojak, you're still around, thank you so much for joining as a captain. Thank you everyone for joining this stream, and I hope you guys have a wonderful game week ahead. Hopefully the Trent captaincy pays off, or hopefully it's similar to the Salah captaincy haul. We'll see what happens. Shout outs to any differential captainers as well. Don't feel too bad. I mean, your mental health is important. At the end of the day, FPL is just a game. You can't get everything right. And if you really think you can do that, please let me know when the next weather delay is going to be, so that I can actually have a fully functioning 11 on that specific game week. But otherwise, take care, guys, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week.